Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning into this channel. The purpose of producing this video is strictly educational and academic. As an expert in U.S.-Korea international relations, foreign policy, security affairs, and political criminal psychology, I have created this lecture to analyze the psychological mechanisms of power collapse, regime, dynamics, and elite behavior within authoritarian structures. This content serves as an illustrative academic essay for educational purposes only, and is not intended to target, criticize, or disparage any specific real-world individual. If you find this video insightful and educational, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this video with others interested in international relations, political psychology, and strategic studies. Your support allows us to continue producing high-quality academic content. Why does power collapse from within? The Venezuelan regime under Maduro and the genesis of regime failure, revealed by political criminal psychology. Centering on the Bardo of attachment. Warned in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Starting today, we will explore one of the most fascinating, yet ruthless topics in modern international politics. Why do certain power structures, despite appearing visually impregnable on the outside, suddenly begin to crumble from within? Why do core advisors who pledged unwavering loyalty for decades turn their backs at the critical juncture? And why do autocratic regimes fear internal psychological decay far more than external military assault? Today, we will examine these fundamental questions through the integrated lenses of international political psychology, political criminal psychology, and the philosophical insights on human attachment and impermanence found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Let us first consider a common misconception. Many people believe that the ultimate force capable of dismantling a nation is military might. They believe that tanks, fighter jets, missiles, aircraft carriers, and overwhelming physical power dictate the destiny of states. However, the history of modern international relations tells a markedly different story. Today, the primary instruments deployed by superpowers are often psychological rather than kinetic. They target the economy, they target financial networks, and most critically, they target the cognitive state of the power elite. In international relations theory, this is articulated not as territorial occupation, but through the frameworks of psychological deterrence and coercive diplomacy. When human resolve and psychological cohesion collapse first, an organization cannot endure, regardless of its physical armor. Political criminal psychology arrives at a strikingly similar conclusion. Whether analyzing criminal enterprises or authoritarian regimes, the most vital asset is neither capital nor weaponry. It is mutual trust. The moment loyalty begins to erode, structural fissures emerge from within the organization. Crucially, these fissures stem not from external hostility, but from internal paranoia and distrust. The Venezuelan case, the collapse of regime psychology. Venezuela serves as a prominent case study, frequently cited to illustrate this dynamic. Having endured prolonged political and economic crises, Venezuela experienced extensive international sanctions and diplomatic pressure. However, the most critical variable here is not merely the macroeconomic deterioration itself. The far more consequential shift occurred within the psychological framework of the ruling elite. In political criminal psychology, power elites rely heavily not on their individual capabilities, but on the cognitive belief that the regime will endure indefinitely. So long as individuals believe that the power structure is permanent, they remain willing to execute high-risk orders and unlawful directives, confident that the system will ultimately shield them from accountability. However, as international pressure intensifies, this absolute confidence begins to fracture. Initially, denial prevails. This will pass shortly. They cannot touch us. The regime will never fall. Over time, this misplaced optimism collides directly with reality. It is precisely at this intersection that cognitive dissonance occurs. While the mind attempts to maintain the illusion of safety, the external environment continually generates undeniable signals of imminent danger. The dictator's deepest fear is not defeat. Intriguingly, the greatest fear of an autocrat is not a simple transfer of power. Political criminal psychology demonstrates that. The primary driver of psychological trauma for a ruler is unpredictability. A predictable defeat can be prepared for, however. An environment where one cannot discern who among their inner circle will commit. Betrayal induces extreme psychological stress. International political psychology yields consistent empirical findings. Internal distrust dismantles an organization vastly faster than an external adversary. Why? Because an external enemy is visible and quantifiable. An internal betrayal, by contrast, remains invisible and hidden. It is this invisible risk that inflicts the most profound damage on human cognition. Can power be sustained through fear alone? Authoritarian regimes frequently employ fear as a mechanism of social control. Paradoxically, the individuals living under the most intense anxiety are often not the ordinary citizenry, but the elite core at the top of the pyramid. Political criminal psychology refers to this phenomenon as the inversion of fear. In the initial stages, the regime uses fear to intimidate the populace. As time progresses, however, the leadership begins to harbor deeper suspicion toward its immediate subordinates than toward the public. Subordinates, in turn, lose faith in the leader's stability. Consequently, a self-reinforcing apparatus of universal surveillance takes root. On the surface, the regime projects strength internally. Its structural integrity is already failing. The symbolism of intelligence defection in contemporary politics and intelligence agency is far more than a routine administrative bureaucracy. It functions as the neural network of state power. Intelligence operatives possess precise knowledge regarding who remains loyal, who harbors dissent, and who poses a threat. Therefore, the defection of key intelligence figures transcends mere individual choices. It serves as a high-level signal that internal regime trust has fractured. International political psychology notes that when such defections occur, other power elites closely monitor one another's actions. Once a primary actor makes a move, others rapidly recalculate their own survival strategies. The prisoner's dilemma within the state. In game theory, the prisoner's dilemma illustrates how rational individuals may not cooperate, even if it appears in their best interest to do so. If both actors remain silent, both are likely to survive. However, if one actor cooperates with the opposition first, the remaining party incurs catastrophic risk. Political criminal psychology explains that this structural vulnerability routinely manifests within high-level power dynamics. During stable periods, the power elite operates as a unified collective. Yet, under severe external pressure, each member begins to ask the exact same questions. Must I make the first move? Will someone else turn me into a scapegoat? Is remaining loyal to the end truly the safest strategy? As these questions multiply, internal cohesion degrades and individual actors shift their decision-making entirely toward personal self-preservation. The first Bardo in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. At this point, we may draw upon an ancient philosophical text. The Tibetan Book of the Dead posits that human beings experience various bardos, transitional states not only after physical death but continuously throughout life. Among these, the most perilous state is not objective reality, but the illusions spawned by attachment. Individuals frequently commit the cognitive error of mistaking power for their true self. They conflate official status with their core identity and assume material wealth will endure forever. Yet the text repeatedly cautions, what you are desperately clinging to is not a tangible reality, but merely a passing shadow. Power is impermanent. Prestige is impermanent. Loyalty secured through terror is equally impermanent. Yet human beings cling to these constructs as though they were eternal. The Tibetan Book of the Dead warns that this very attachment constitutes the primary origin of human suffering. Why humans cling to beliefs over reality. Psychological research indicates that human beings find it exceptionally difficult to abandon established beliefs, even when directly confronted with opposing facts. This cognitive rigidity is particularly pronounced among those holding power, who have operated under the assumption of their own absolute authority for decades. Yet reality remains fluid. Politics shifts, the international order evolves, and economic conditions fluctuate. The only constant in international relations is change itself. Eastern philosophical traditions frequently reiterate the truth that what reaches its zenith must decline, and what becomes full must wane. This principle is far more than a simple proverb. It is a fundamental insight into the nature of political power. When power reaches its absolute peak, humility and rigorous self-reflection become paramount. Without them, it is not the external adversary, but one's own internal attachments that ultimately precipitate the collapse. Today, through the analytical framework of the Venezuelan case, we have examined the crucial role psychological transformations play in the dismantling of political power. International political psychology demonstrates that the fate of a nation is never determined solely by physical force or financial reserves. Political criminal psychology reveals that organizational collapse is fundamentally tied to the erosion of internal trust. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead reminds us that at the root of all these dynamics lie attachment and fear. Attachment to power breeds fear. Fear breeds suspicion, and suspicion inevitably yields mutual paranoia. In our next session, we will explore how these psychological fissures played out across other historical case studies, analyzing why certain power structures experienced cascading defections and internal fragmentation. Thank you very much for watching today's lecture. If you found this analysis helpful and engaging, please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and share this video with your colleagues and friends. Your active participation helps us produce more in-depth lectures, combining international politics, political psychology, and security philosophy. Until next time, stay curious and analytical. Thank you.